If you have ever felt stuck on an important goal, project, or habit, you are far from alone. Maybe you find yourself saying, I just need to find more discipline and motivation, and then I can take action. Or telling yourself, oh, if I just had the right systems and tools in place, then everything would fall into place and it would be easy. What if you are, though, facing invisible barriers, ones that you can't even see that are holding you back? Because there is more than one way to feel stuck. And if we don't understand the different types of roadblocks, then we might waste time and energy trying to fix something that is not actually going to help us. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at the three types of roadblocks, how they can keep you stuck, and then how do you use the momentum formula in order to remove them so that you can start to take action on goals that matter to you. And let's start with this idea of goals. We have this target in mind, this future version of ourselves, of where we want to be, where we want to get. Right now, we're over here. We're kind of down over in the bottom, and we have an idea of the path. Maybe it's not a straight path. It rarely is. But if we don't realize that there are going to be different types of roadblocks along the way, these barriers that are going to make it hard for us to get closer to the goal, then it can be hard for us to make progress. So what we want to do first is understand, what are these roadblocks? There are three, in my personal opinion. So the first one is a logical roadblock. This is where you're just missing information or skills. You cannot move forward because something is missing. You need to either learn how to do something new, or you need some extra information or context. So a logical problem is the first type, and it's actually very common for us to have. The next one is biological. Now, I say biological because I think of this being how we are wired, and just all of us are different. So what works really well for me might not work well for you. And so we can often be following advice from someone else because what they're doing works, but it doesn't actually work for us. It doesn't feel natural, it doesn't fit, and so we struggle to actually make changes or maintain any changes that last. And then finally, we have a psychological roadblock. This is where our brain, it's very sophisticated, it's very smart, but it is saying like, ooh, maybe don't do that because something bad might happen. In other words, our brain is saying, oh, let's keep ourselves safe and not take action on this because something could happen that I don't want to happen. When you understand that those are different types of roadblocks, you can see they are not going to all have the same solution. And what happens with modern advice is it often focuses so much on logical. Here's what to do. We also really like to be told exactly what to do. Just tell me what to do so I can do it and I can get out of this rut I've been in. I just want to get into action. Don't make me think. But this is limited. So how do we actually overcome these roadblocks? Well, if you have a logical challenge, you want a method. Clear instructions, you want information, skills, and implementation. So what do you need to know? What skills do you need to know? And when is it happening? When, where, what tools do you need? When you have a clear path of how to get from here to there, then you can follow that. And it's clear and it's repeatable and it's complete. For a biological challenge, we need to address the mode. Do I need to make any modifications to how I work? How is this going to suit me so that I actually enjoy doing this, or so that it suits how I'm wired, my preferences, all of these things, even biology, how my brain works? When we address the mode, we're making it fit. And then finally, there's psychological. We need to adopt a mindset that is free of these fears that are holding us back. This one is often the hardest work, but can be the most meaningful work when we truly start to challenge some of these fears that are holding us back and have that mindset that allows us to take forward action. And when we put it all together, we have the method, the mode, and the mindset. Now, this is the core of what I call the momentum formula. Now, simply put, it is method plus mode plus mindset equals momentum. But the true power of this formula is actually what happens when you start to combine these things together. So when you have a method that is clear and repeatable and a mindset that is free of fears, this is where you can take consistent action, meaning you're following a plan and you're not holding yourself back from fear. But if you don't have that mode, this is where it might not feel natural. It might not feel like a fit. So even if you're taking consistent action, it might not last because you might feel tired. This might feel unsustainable. because it doesn't really suit how you like to work. Now, what if we have the mode and the mindset? This is where you have a natural fit, you are doing things that you like, and you have a mindset that's free of fears, that's allowing you to take action. This is what I call aligned action. Think of the person who says, "Oh, I really like doing this, so I'm going to do this now." It is aligned, but it might not be consistent because you don't have a method. So maybe each time you do it, it looks a little bit different. Maybe things are falling through the cracks, and it's possible that you're not making progress as quickly as you could if you were following a clear method. Now, what happens if you have a method and the mode? Well, the method and the mode together, this is where we get what's called a sustainable system, meaning you have a method of this plan that is clear and complete, and you have a mode that fits and feels natural and it suits you. This is something you could do over and over and over again. But if you don't have that mindset at the bottom, if you've got fears that are holding you back, in this case, you're probably not actually using this sustainable system. You are likely either feeling frozen or you are taking a couple steps forward and maybe one step back, where you have a start and stop situation because those fears are really getting in the way. When we put all of this together, we have method, mode, and mindset that creates a sustainable system and allows you to take consistent and aligned action. That is what we want. That is how you get into action and stay in action. Now, you might understand this and think, okay, I get that, but how do I actually use it? How do I make sense of this? Now, the first thing is that when you see this, there's a very good chance that you'll just say right away, oh, I know which one I need to work on. And in that case, you can start working on that. But I do think it's helpful to go in order, start with method, and then work your way through. So that is what we're going to do. And actually for this video, we're going to focus on a sort of common challenge that many people have, which is a consistent exercise routine. So we want it to be consistent, we want it to be aligned, and we want it to be sustainable. And a lot of people struggle with that. And maybe you are one of the people right now who has a great exercise routine and you're consistent. It maybe didn't always feel that way, and you might have needed to test some things to get there. So let's zero in and look at this. So first, we want a method. So we want it to be clear and repeatable. We also want it to be complete so that we have all the information, the skills we need, and we know how to implement. So the way I break this down is that you need to know certain information. You also need to have skills to be able to act on that information, and we need to implement it. So when is it happening? Where is it happening? What tools are we using? Now, in the case of exercise, first of all, there are just so many ways to exercise. We're going to use an example of getting stronger, because we know that muscle mass is really helpful. So in this example, this is just one example of many ways to exercise. We're looking at a strength routine. So let's imagine, we're going to actually write this down. What information do you need? So if you are doing a strength routine, you need to know what exercises you're actually doing. And you also need to know what order. So this might be things like how many sets, how many reps. Maybe you have an actual program that you are following. Maybe you decide to take a class, but you need to at least start somewhere. And so what information do you need in order to start following the strength program? Now, the skills, you have to be able to do them safely. So in this case, you are making sure that you have proper form. Whether you work with someone to do that, whether you watch instructional videos, you have to develop those skills so that you can be safe. Now, when it comes to when, there's so many times, but let's say for this example, we want to do 3 times per week, and maybe after work is something we can try. So for this example, we'll say 5:30 p.m. after work, 3 times a week. Where? Well, let's actually start with the basement because there are some weights in the basement and it's really accessible. So some tools, maybe the tools are having some weights, maybe some bands, and possibly some gear. Maybe you need some shoes and some workout gear. So we have gone over, this is a really simple exercise, and also it does not have to be overly complicated to get started. But essentially what we're doing is starting with this concept of what information, what skills, and how would I implement it? And the more specific, the better, but it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. In actual fact, what we want to do is make sure that we're asking, what's the simplest, clear, and effective method I can start with? Especially if you are feeling stuck, just break it down into what is the simplest version, meaning as simple as possible, but no simpler. So we still want it to be complete. We want to be able to answer all of the questions that we set out. We want it to be clear so we know exactly what to do when it's time to do it. In this example, that could be when it's time to work out, I want to know which exercise I'm doing, in which order, how many sets, how many reps. But we also want it to be effective. Does this work? Does it get us closer to our goal? Because you don't want to waste time doing something that doesn't actually work. So start with this question when it comes to the method, and you can always build from there. The next one, mode. Let's think about how this can be a natural fit. Now, when it comes to mode, there are 4 different categories I like to think about. The first is biology, meaning how we're wired. So this could look like when you are energized and focused in the day for this specific thing. So when it comes to exercise, when do you actually get the best output for exercising? This could also, biology can relate to how we're wired from a neurodiversity standpoint and keeping that in mind. So if you have ADHD or autism, keeping those in mind as you are working on whatever goal or habit you're working on. Now, environment, this has to do with where we put ourselves. So depending on your goal, are you going to thrive in an environment maybe that has other people around? Do you like to be surrounded by other people? Or are you actually do you feel better or more successful when you are on your own and maybe free of certain people or all people? Expectations. So expectations has to do with how we respond to expectations that are either put on us by others or by ourselves. So a really helpful framework for this is called the 4 tendencies. I won't get into that today, but this idea that some people respond really well to external expectations, like myself, others actually really don't like to be told what to do. So based on what you know about yourself, you can use this to your advantage. For example, I tend to skip something I tell myself I'm going to do, but if there's an outer expectation or accountability, that works really well for me. And then finally, preferences. So just actually thinking about, what do you like? What do you gravitate towards? What do you gravitate away from? And keep these in mind. If you're trying to build something sustainable, we want to pay attention to that. So if we think about this example with the exercise and we go through these 4 questions, first let's look at biology. So what's the time of day? Maybe you start trying this method. It's a simple, clear, effective method, but you're noticing that that time of day, you're flagging, your energy is not great. So maybe you want to try something different. And perhaps you are someone who says, okay, let's actually try the mornings and see. I tend to maybe be a little bit more alert. I have a bit more willpower in the mornings. I'm going to try that instead. For environment, maybe you realize that working out by yourself in the basement is actually kind of isolating and you work out more effectively or you push yourself more around others. So perhaps you actually want to shift and start going to a gym instead, or maybe start going to classes. With expectations, if you're someone like myself who responds better to outer accountability, maybe you hire a trainer. Maybe you're someone who maybe you don't want to do a trainer right away, but you might have a workout buddy, whether you actually go to the gym together or you just check in regularly and keep track with each other of how things are going. And then when it comes to preferences, this can be anything. Like maybe you try a few different classes and you realize that one class responds really well and maybe another, you just can't stand it. If you dread doing an exercise or maybe there's a strength program and you don't like doing those exercises, maybe it's time to actually swap exercises and do something else that you are much more likely to do. And when it comes to this, it's about asking these questions of, what do I like? What I'm willing to do? Also, what does this look like if it's fun? I want to be able to enjoy myself, especially when it comes to something you want to do for the rest of your life. And we all know as humans, we want to be healthy. We want to exercise regularly as part of that. So how do I make it something that I can actually look forward to? So a question you can ask yourself is, how do I modify this to suit me and how I'm wired? How can I enjoy the process? What are some things I can do to change this? Because that will make a big difference with actually being consistent, is if it also feels aligned. Now we want to shift to the next one, which is mindset. Ultimately, we are going for a mindset that is free of fears, and that is not always easy. Now, when it comes to mindset, I like to think about the fact that there are 2 versions of ourselves. So the first version of ourselves is this person. This is our happy person. This is our why. So when you think about mindset, we want to think about this idea of why. Why do we want to exercise regularly? Why do we want to be strong? Maybe I don't want to have injuries. I want to live a long life. I want to be able to put luggage overhead until I'm in my 80s when I'm on trips. So having a strong why is really important. And a lot of traditional advice for either productivity or goals and habits, it will say you need to have a strong why. And I agree. This is thinking of our future self and thinking about our desired identity. So, who's the person we want to be? But we often don't take time to think about this version, which is our why not? And this is the part that has some fears, has some hesitations. So, when we ask ourselves, why am I not taking action? We can really start to get to the bottom of why we're holding ourselves back. Why are we reluctant? Why are we procrastinating? Why are we putting things off? And this is because we all have a dreaded identity as well. This is the person we don't want to be, we don't want to be seen as, we don't want to experience ourselves. And if we don't take time to ask ourselves not just the why, but also the why not, then often just the why on its own is not strong enough. And so we will struggle to take action and we'll think there's something wrong with us when really our brain is trying to protect us from something bad happening. These psychological roadblocks are actually really sophisticated because we're trying to prevent negative outcomes. Now, if we're thinking about this idea of the dreaded identity or this experience we're trying to avoid, we can ask ourselves the question of what worries arise when I picture myself taking consistent action. Now, I say consistent action because honestly, it's pretty easy for most of us to imagine doing something once. I can go to the gym once. But if we actually imagine going to the gym for the rest of our lives, that can often, we can feel that icky feeling in our gut where it says, I don't know about that. So when we tap into that, we can start to say, what's maybe a dreaded identity we're trying to avoid? How do we not want to be seen by ourselves or by others? So an example, if I am hesitating to go to the gym regularly, maybe I'm worried that I am going to find out that I'm actually weak and I am fragile. And maybe I'm just not cut out for this. So if I just don't go, I won't find out. What if you think that spending regular time at the gym is actually maybe selfish because you're taking a lot of time for yourself? Maybe you're taking time away from your family. Or you think about those people that take lots of pictures of themselves at the gym and you think, what if I become self-absorbed? I am just so wrapped up in how I look and my fitness that somehow I get lost and I'm not myself anymore and I stop caring about things that matter. And when I say these on the outside, you might immediately think, oh, this isn't necessarily true. But if we have even a kernel of that fear, they can still have power over us. So these are just a couple of examples of worries that you might have. Maybe you also are worried that you'll have resentment from your family. So if you are spending more time on yourself or away from home, maybe you're worried that people are going to start resenting you and it's going to break down barriers with your relationship. Everyone is different when it comes to the type of fears that we experience when it comes to stopping ourselves from taking action. And those are just a few examples. There are so many different reasons we may hesitate to take action. And obviously, this is just for exercise, but if we spend a little bit of time trying to picture what is that version I'm trying to avoid? What's that negative outcome I'm trying to avoid? That's a really helpful way for us to figure out some of those hesitations we're having. Now, what do you do with that? Well, now we need to challenge it and say, is this true? If I start exercising regularly, am I going to be seen as selfish? Will I see myself as selfish? Will my family resent me? Will I find out that I'm actually weak and fragile and maybe I'll get hurt and I'm actually not the person I thought I was? So we want to ask ourselves, how can I challenge my fears in a way that still feels safe? And this is a really important question. How can I do this so I still feel safe? You don't want to take such a big swing that suddenly a bad thing does happen. Here's an example. If you are thinking that your family is going to resent the time you are spending away from them, focused on your fitness, well, one way you could test this safely is maybe ask your family, how they would feel, because we're making up this whole scenario in our head and we haven't necessarily even checked in. The other thing is that we could start small. So maybe we start going to the gym once or twice a week, and then we do a home workout. Or maybe we find ways to start exercising with our family so that we're not necessarily away from them, but we do it in a way where we're taking these small actionable steps. Perhaps instead of going to an hour-long class, you do a 30-minute class or a 30-minute workout. So there are ways to just gently test the waters, do it in a way where you don't feel like you're just diving into the deep end where something bad could happen. You want to take it slow and also pay attention to what happens. Does the bad thing happen? Or maybe not. You can also look for examples of other people where you actually don't think anything of them. So maybe you think of someone who is exercising regularly and it's someone in your life, like your best friend or a sibling, and you don't have these assumptions. You don't think they're self-absorbed or that they're selfish for taking care of their health. So there are ways that we can gently push back against it, but we want to do it in a way that is safe. So that's sort of an intro into the way that we can start to look at method, mode, and mindset. But there are a few things I really want you to hear. So pay attention to these three things. The first is that this is dynamic, meaning you don't just do this once and it's done. This is because we change, we evolve, our circumstances change. What worked one time in your life might not work in another. We all go through seasons. Our capacity levels change. So when that happens, go back, look at the method, look at the mode, look at the mindset. We can also develop more fears as we get closer to our goal. So we want to be constantly checking in. You shouldn't be constantly tweaking your method and mode all the time, but once you start to notice some friction, once you start to notice that something doesn't feel right, I'm struggling to be consistent or I'm feeling stuck again, go back. Now, the next thing is that you need to take action to figure out what works. If you come up with a method, you need to try the method to figure out if it works. If you want to make adjustments to the mode to see if it's going to be a natural fit, you need to actually try it and see if it fits. Also with mindset, if you are going to challenge a fear, you need to take action and pay attention to what happens. So no matter what, take action. Now, this can be imperfect action. Almost no one ever has everything perfectly figured out before they even step foot onto their journey towards change. You make changes as you go. So start with imperfect action, but take action. And then you will learn what works for you. And then third, and really importantly, you need to also trust yourself that you are capable of figuring this out. You can ask yourself questions. You can sit down and think about the best method for you in your context right now. You can think about your biology, your environment, your preferences, all of that. You have the answers internally. And as much as you want to say, please just tell me what to do, we need to trust ourselves that you have some inner wisdom of what is going to work. You can also look at other examples in your life of what you've learned about yourself, and you can import that into different goals and habits that you are trying to develop, because you are capable of figuring this out. As much as you want someone else to just serve it up, I bet that if you look back and you think of all the times where someone just told you what to do, odds are it only worked for so long. So you can look at your method, your mode, and your mindset. Now, when you do this, I encourage you to try it. And if you do try this, please let me know in the comments. How did it go? What did you learn about yourself? Did it make a change? Did it make it so that taking action was a little bit more consistent, a little bit more sustainable, and also a little bit more aligned? Because I know I want to hear from you if you make any changes and you learn anything about yourself or you see progress, but also other people in the comments can learn from you too, because we can all learn from each other. But you won't actually know if it works until you take action on your method, your mode, and your mindset so that you can start to build a sustainable system and take aligned and consistent action.